The human and the jinn, good and evil, a strong thin line between every two, and despite that, every word points to a different world. But living between the two is possible. This might happen. Let me tell you that it could happen, and you will see things you never imagined could happen, even if in the worst nightmares. I am Sheikh Amin, over 70 years old. Originally, I was a shopkeeper of herbs, inheriting it from my father, Sheikh Mohammed, the herbalist. Moreover, I inherited from him something more important than that. The talent is not any talent. It's not singing, acting, or no. It's the talent of spiritual healing. May Allah have mercy on him. He was a sheikh among the great Sufi sheikhs. He taught me, disciplined me, and gave me the covenant of safety with the jinn. I've dealt with people and lives have changed because of me, meaning I was just a cause, not more, and Allah is the facilitator. And of course, healing is in the hands of our Lord. We are just means, my son. I've been through many powerful stories, but let me tell you a story directly. For the first case, I treated alone. This happened specifically after my father's death when I was in my early 20s, and my experience was very limited. But I was arrogant, believed in myself, and considered myself something big and powerful, unlike anyone else. I received a phone call from an old friend named Obaid. Obaid was working intensely at a temple of the pharaonic temples in a village belonging to a governorate in Upper Egypt. When I answered the call, I heard Obaid screaming and saying to me, "You'll kill us, the house has become haunted and he's practicing sorcery." Then there was the sound of screams, howls, and terrifying noises of people quarreling. All of this was happening in the background of the call. When I asked Obaid about what was happening, he told me, while being connected, that it wouldn't be useful to talk on the phone. He would tell me everything when I arrive, and that I would assess the situation because he is living alone. By the way, I thought for a moment without asking for details and said to him, "Okay, Obaid, I'm coming." Music. And from here the strange story that happened in the Hagan house began, and I will tell you about it. And my intention in it is one thing, but the lesson may indeed be a lesson for everyone, whether to consider or not. The next day, I reached the train station and took a car, driving for over an hour until I reached the magical place. It was on a high mountain, and I went down to find Obaid waiting for me on the road. I told him, "It's too far." He welcomed me, took me, and we went to the house of Shaban, the Hagan. The Hagan house was close to the pharaonic temple, where Obaid was working heavily from one side, and from the other side was a high mountain area surrounded by a vast desert with no end. It had a great atmosphere of majesty and awe, as they say. The place had a big aura. The house had a high reputation and a heavy wooden door, one of the old heavy doors loaded. He stood in front of the door, knocked for minutes, and the door opened. Shaban appeared behind it, a tall man. His skin was dark, looking like he was in his early 50s, wearing a galabeya, and he seemed exhausted, very tired, fatigue, and the terrible. Shaban welcomed us, and we entered the house, it was a collection of rooms adjacent to each other, built on a large piece of land with a spacious courtyard in the middle of the rooms. In the courtyard, there were local sofas with branches of trees providing shade from the sun's heat. We entered and sat in the courtyard, and tea, the Upper Egyptian style, was prepared. Shaban started talking, saying, "Welcome, Sheikh Amin. Obaid talked a lot about you and your late father. May he rest in peace. He said that you inherited his knowledge. I will tell you exactly what is happening. Although you are young, they say you are strong. I have been living here in the village for many years due to my work. I worked a lot in Cairo and traveled here and there. but you know my accent and dialect are normal, mixed. I work in the Haganah weapon. I am married and have 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. Life was good and we were content, but suddenly the house started experiencing strange occurrences. The children started having convulsions, accidents happened to them, and fires broke out in the house without any apparent reason. The youngest boy and girl developed high fevers every day, and it would come and go without any remedy, and no treatment or hospital helped. For about a few days, the youngest girl's fever kept increasing like she was sitting on a boiling pot. Her temperature kept rising, and she fainted. Her mother cried out, and we thought she had died. But in less than an hour, her fever dropped, and she woke up, asking for water and food as if nothing had happened. But our hearts were shattered with grief, and her mother was dying of sorrow. The older children also experienced severe pains. Some had broken arms, others had broken legs, one had an open head, and one was paralyzed for a few hours. Each tongue got twisted and untangled on its own, and one experienced pain so intense that he fainted in the bathroom. Another continued to scream without reason, and one remained jumping as if electrified. The panic filled the children's faces as if they saw demons in front of them. As soon as they calmed down, they would fall into a deep sleep and wake up forgetting everything that happened. Believe me, my son, for a year now, not a single day has passed without a disaster occurring. Disasters follow one another, and before we recover from one, another one happens. We thought it was envy, or the house was angry. Perhaps it could be a curse or a jinx on the house. We were perplexed, not knowing what to do. The translation of the provided text to English is as follows: intense anger, and this anger is surely for a reason. Shaban was about to collapse from what he heard out of fear for his children and wife. Shaban's wife sat with Shaban's friend's wife, a kind woman in her late 40s. She asked her if she saw anything unusual in her dreams. She hesitated a bit, then composed herself and spoke, saying, "All my dreams are filled with fear, horror, and panic. We can't sleep, and our eyes don't close, shake. I became afraid to leave the house, fearing I won't return. My life will end if I step out. I used to send my older daughters for errands, but they eventually refused to go out, saying they'll be kidnapped or killed. They are terrified, Sheikh." Shaban's friend's wife finished her words and stood up because she needed to rest. All of them, clearly exhausted, showed tremendous fatigue, not to mention the fear on their faces. In our town, they appeared suspicious, wearing traditional attire and talking about unnatural things. I know that even if someone cast a spell on them, the situation wouldn't be this chaotic. The older daughters, when I spoke to them, insisted it was impossible. I learned from them that they were engaged and everything was going smoothly. However, without any reason, their fiancé broke off the engagement one after the other, leaving no time in between. At the same time, Shaban's uncle intervened and said, every time I tried to talk to them about breaking off the engagement, they would scream, convulse, and transform as if they were possessed. I felt they were not my daughters anymore. The newlyweds got fed up after hearing about the house, as they were attached to the girls. No one can blame them, my son. They said, "May your soul rest in peace. We can't take it anymore." They left hurriedly, away from their family. After my conversation with Shaban and his family, I stayed for 3 days. I used to sleep at Obaid's place, waking up for Fajr prayer with him. Then he would go to work, and I would go to Shaban's house. Shaban had taken leave from his work to be present. I would sit in the backyard, reading the Quran and contemplating. Until the 4th day, when I was going to the Hagan family's house in the morning, I heard intense shouting. I rushed in and found a difficult situation. The house was in disarray, and there was chaos. Shaban's friend's wife was terrified and couldn't control her nerves. I felt the presence of something evil that I couldn't see. I recited the 2 protective surahs and the chair prayer, saying, "Seek refuge with Allah and His power on this day. Do not show yourselves to us. Do not harm us." I continued reading the Quran and prayers until Shaban's friend's wife calmed down. It wasn't easy, but she and the children sat with me in the backyard, and she said, strangled by the overwhelming sense of helplessness and the removal of my ability to think, this was the first situation I attempted to address on my own. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but in previous instances, my father, Sheikh Mohammed, used to handle it. I was just an assistant, learning as I went. I left Shaban's house and went for a walk in the town, talking to myself, saying that I had done everything I knew, learned everything, and exerted all my efforts, but there was no result. The matter is not as simple as the recitation and reading of the family members themselves. They are compelled to pray in this house where the Quran was frequently recited, but it doesn't help. I always blamed Khaita. She seemed to be the root of the problems. I felt like the goal was to harm her through her children. At night, I sat with a friend in his house, and Shaban came and greeted me politely. He said, "You've tried a lot, my son, but like many others, you couldn't achieve anything. I don't want to burden you more. You've been with Ubaid for a while, the human and the jinn, good and evil, a strong, thin line between every two, and despite that, every word points to a different world. But living between the two is possible. This might happen. Let me tell you that it could happen, and you will see things you never imagined could happen, even if in the worst nightmares. I am Sheikh Amin, over 70 years old. Originally, I was a shopkeeper of herbs, inheriting it from my father, Sheikh Mohammed, the herbalist. Moreover, I inherited from him something more important than that. The talent is not any talent. It's not singing, acting, or no. It's the talent of spiritual healing. May Allah have mercy on him. He was a sheikh among the great Sufi sheikhs. He taught me, disciplined me, and gave me the covenant of safety with the jinn. I've dealt with people and lives have changed because of me, meaning I was just a cause, not more, and Allah is the facilitator, and His circumstances are tough on him. I don't want to be the reason for him carrying a heavier load. He is innocent. His words shook me from the inside, and I felt helpless and embarrassed. I said, "May God have mercy on you, Dad. If you were present, all this wouldn't have happened." I told Shaban that I had genuinely tried everything I could, but I couldn't figure out the reason. I didn't know what was causing all these events. Sorry for the long message. Just give me a week, and if nothing happens, I'll leave and spare you. I won't lie to you. I felt defeated, especially because it was the first time I tried to solve a problem on my own. I was confident and believed in myself, but the situation was tough. If I couldn't achieve anything within a week, then it's up to God, and there's nothing more I can do. I won't continue with this matter. It's not my field, especially since it was the first situation I faced alone. I failed, and now I understand why, Mr. Yunus. I told you the story, especially because it was the turning point in deciding whether I would continue or not. I left Ubaid's place, went for a walk, thinking with a troubled mind. How could Shaban and his family decide that I make a final attempt, doing what my father used to do, and try to summon the jinn living in that house? I went to the market, bought specific incense that my father knew, and special materials we would use. I returned home, went into Shaban's house, and sat alone in the courtyard at night. The family members were inside, and I asked them not to leave their rooms, no matter what happens or what they hear. I lit the incense and said, I swear to you by the majesty of the conquering mighty Al-Qahar, who clothed the chosen ones from his creation. I swear by the power that they are from Solomon, and that it is in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Rise above me and show yourselves. Muslims, Muslims, Muslims. I swear to you, sons of Al-Dahani and Al-Kaftashi, and the young ones, and the crossroads, and the divers under the earth, and the inhabitants of the deserts, steppes, caves, hills, and mountaintops. Whether you are Arab or non-Arab, I swear to you by his might, respond to my call and attend this gathering. Residents of this house, residents of this house, residents of this house, I swear to you. He who delayed from his creation, I swear to you strongly that they are from Solomon. I felt a new warmth and embodiment from the void, a being or a creature saying, our invitation is for the presence of who you are and what you are. I spoke with her, and she introduced herself, her name being Leila, by the way. The strange thing is that she knew my late father, may God have mercy on him, and said that he was well known in their world. No one dared to disobey his command, ever. Because I am his daughter, and as an honor to him and the good relationship between him and her, she attended without the others who used to mock me and thought I didn't deserve their presence. Let me tell you what she said. She told me that Kaitar was heating oil, and the oil was boiling while she was washing potatoes on the pump. The oil was boiling hard, and there was a cat on the kitchen roof running and digging in it like ordinary cats. The kitchen roof was made of reeds and leaves, and straw and dirt fell into the oil. Kaitar saw the oil full of straw and dirt. She took the pan, threw the boiling oil in the bathroom, and because of her, the 6 children burned. Besides my children, many others were also burned by us. She continued, saying that Kaitar had a vast desert in front of her. She could have thrown the oil in the sand, or she could have left it until it cooled and then thrown it in the bathroom if she was determined to do so. But she, without mercy or pity, disfigured my children, entered our house and burned us. Leila continued her words, and her appearance began to change. Her face truly looked burned severely, and her flesh started falling to the ground. She said, "See how I look. I just wanted to show you what she did to my children, and how she disfigured them and disfigured me too. All right, I see that you've harmed them enough. Enough is enough. Let's go back to living in peace. You mind your own business, and they'll mind theirs." She told me with anger, "No, it's necessary." At that moment, I began to feel a very strong presence in the place, and a strange energy of anger filled the atmosphere. I knew these were the Jinn who were harmed by the boiling oil. It's true that not many of them died, but those who died, died, and those who will live disfigured. I was trying to handle the situation in any way because I knew they had a right, and in our culture, they do. I turned to Kaitar and said, "Okay, what satisfaction needs to be done? What is required for atonement for what happened? They are escalating the situation, not making it easier for us. And if someone wronged your children, my children, every time I see my children, they remind him of the disfigurement, and they are still alive. But for those who are still alive, every time I see one of them disfigured, my heart breaks. You are more honorable than Us. I request from you to be more generous than Us and forgive. I am begging you to ask for anything to be done to resolve this issue. Trust me, the matter will not end like this. You will seek revenge, and they will seek revenge, and the cycle will continue. Trust me, consider me a link for good, Leila." She remained silent for a while, as if contemplating. Then she said, "Sheikh," and left. Throughout the night I kept thinking, what would be her response? Would she come back to me with an answer? When I slept at night, I saw myself standing inside, not in the actual graveyard, but inside a mound of earth. I was looking to the right and left, feeling a presence around me, but I couldn't see it. Beside each mound of earth, someone was knocking from the inside. I went from one door to another, trying to open it, but they were all locked until I found one where someone was standing, not visible in the darkness. When I approached, I recognized her. It was Leila. She said to me, "My children brought this upon themselves. None of them closed." Behind her, from a distance, I saw people coming, and there were sounds of chains clashing. When they approached, I found two very tall Jinn, their appearance very frightening, dragging our brother who was tied with chains around his hands and feet. They ignored my presence and acted as if I wasn't there. They gathered around a mound of earth, opened it, and threw Kaita inside. I waited for them to close the earth, as it usually happens in horror movies, or generally in horror. But they left the mound of earth open. They had another purpose. And the first door of the closed mound was opened, from which the cries of children seeking forgiveness emerged. A child came out running on all fours, like animals, with great speed. From the second mound, a child crawled on its belly, moving slowly as if it couldn't move. The third mound produced a child walking on its legs normally, but with a slight limp. The subsequent mounds released children who had emerged from their soil. All of them entered Kaita's place, and as soon as they entered and their number was complete, the door of the grave shook violently upon them inside with Kaita. I heard her screaming as if someone's flesh was being torn while they were alive. From the door of the soil, and in the dim light of the moon, I saw blood flowing on the iron door. It was like a stream of blood, but it started increasing, and her screams intensified to the point that it covered the door of the soil completely. Someone opened a tap, not doing anything because it was releasing blood, and the blood began to move towards me. I was standing there, barefoot, and as soon as the blood reached my feet, I felt a burning sensation, a fire. Blood started coming out on my legs, from my legs to my abdomen, from there to my chest, until there was nothing left but my face, and I breathed freely. I was drowning in a sea of blood, drowning in a sea of blood, drowning in a sea of blood. It was a very difficult nightmare that made me sure that when Leila returns, her response would be complete rejection, an absolute rejection with no room for negotiation or discussion. The next day, at the same agreed-upon time, Leila attended in her usual appearance without any disfigurements and said to me, "I want a specific incense called Akik incense. I want you to burn it on the last night of the Arabic month. All the Jinn who repented will be present, and they will inhale this incense in exchange for forgiveness." I told her it's expensive, rare, and not even available. She said, "Do you know why this incense? This incense heals the bodies of the Jinn, renewing their bodies and extending their lives." I heard this information and I don't know if it's true or not. Believe me, your request is difficult, like asking for red mercury, something that nobody can find. There's a lot of talk that it's unknown and imaginary. Please ask for something I can execute for you. Please ask for something I can do for you. Our request is difficult, and the only alternative is for us to take our right. I believe the potion I saw in the dream yesterday. How can we obtain it? By the way, we won't take our right from Kaita, but Kaita and her children will disfigure themselves in front of you for 3 days. The text appears to be a narrative in Arabic. Below is the English translation. Searching for what is needed, and if not, the agreement is considered void. All I ask for is medicine. Medicine to treat and heal what they have suffered. Can't you leave them in their state for these 3 days? The torment continues until the covenant is fulfilled. After that, Mr. Yunus disappeared. I called Shaban, scolded him, talked to the children, and told them everything that happened with Leila. I explained to them the reason behind everything that is happening, the matter of the boiled oil, and everything else. The boys who were present with us confirmed the issue and said that their mother indeed did this, And it's not the first time she has done it, by the way. If she repeated the previous times, this time we confronted Shaban. He kept saying she didn't mean it, she didn't mean to harm anyone, and with good intentions. I told him whether she meant it or not, the bear killed its owner out of fear and concern for him. Dealing with these creatures and the requests they make for reconciliation is difficult. They demand a rare and very expensive type of incense. I'm thinking about leaving the house and moving to the other side, the coastal side of the mountain, to distance ourselves from the problems. Applause. If I go to the end of the world and imagine that these distances matter to them, why do you calculate in our human terms? They are behind you wherever you go. Tarek, why do you assume we, Shaban? How are you? I may be Upper Egyptian and understand, but I, on the other hand, have also thought well. I don't want to rush and get what is required because the Jinn are deceptive. They may lie to me, take the money, burn the incense, treat them. And in the end, they do not fulfill the agreement. On the contrary, the incense will strengthen them more, and the war will become fiercer, and harm will happen. In the end, we will have done nothing but ruin our home. I'm confused about everything that happened, Sheikh Amin. Everyone is free to throw something hot or something cold in their house. Why bother us? I don't know if you heard this talk before, Shaban, or what. Throwing hot oil or boiling water or a burning paper in a fire or extinguishing a cigarette in the bathroom water is wrong. It can accidentally cause harm to one of them. Thus, you have attacked them. And why do you have the right? We are not inside the bathroom. We say, I seek refuge in Allah from the evil and the devils. Shaban. Yes, we say it because you are inside their house. You may hear them saying when you come to sleep on the bed, wipe your hand on the bed. Yes, the same response her children gave. What is their fault? An eye for an eye, Shaban, and the starter is darker. Unfortunately, we had nothing but to trust her words, and may God cover us after that. I traveled to Asyut and started looking for the required incense. The matter took 2 days during these 2 days. I knew that on the first day, Shaban's eldest daughter used to go up to the roof on a wooden ladder. But as she was coming down, she saw that the ground under the ladder had a big hole, and the ladder was barely resting on the edge. If she continued down, it would take her and she would stand in this unseen hole. She got scared, jumped to the other side, and when she fell, her leg and arm broke with multiple fractures. They took her to the hospital, which was 50 kilometers away. She was paralyzed, and the next day, her house was preparing for washing the clothes, and she wanted to wash the clothes with her hands. She is convinced that this is more important or better, each person at their own discretion. The girl brought a large metal sheet, filled it with water, and raised it on a few brick molds like a cannon. She lit some wood underneath to heat the water, and when the water started boiling, her mother was sitting next to the sheet to take out the hot clothes and put them in the basin, adding water from the pump. After finishing, she washed them by hand. After a while, her daughter came to help her carry the basin. She saw a snake coming out on her mother's leg. The girl stood still in fear. Her mother didn't feel anything, and then the girl started shouting and the metal sheet fell. Boiling water to kill the malicious one. The boiling water went down on Bakit's leg, and her entire body continued to convulse. Chaos and confusion took over the house. The usual and the horror overwhelmed everyone. Bakit's young son tried to find his father around the mountain near the temple, and indeed found him. Shaban returned home and took Bakit to the hospital, accompanied by friends and neighbors. She received medical attention, but her condition still allows me to tell you that I changed the name of the incense so that no one would look for it. Would you believe me if I told you that the incense was obtained with a number that no one would believe due to the many zeros in it? Anyway, when I returned, I learned everything that happened. At night, before the end of the 3rd day, I burned the incense and requested to make a covenant to stop this war. Leila's response was that she had requested a grace period before making the covenant. I said we fulfilled the requests. Why the delay? She told me that there is a division. Not all tribe members agree on this solution. Some agreed to reconcile and took the incense, but one Jinn named Shaban is determined to seek revenge. I asked her, why didn't you say this from the beginning? Why are you now not committed, Leila? She told me that she suffers because everyone who took the incense will renounce Bakit and her children. However, it seems that I am not in control of Shaban. His heart is burning for revenge against Bakit and his children. This is beyond my control. Shaban is the only one who has the right to forgive them, and he knows what satisfies him. She left me and disappeared, leaving us in a worse situation than before. The disaster escalated. The house became filled with anger and evil energy. I won't tell you more than that. The disaster is that Shaban had no demands, he only wants revenge, and we entered mazes with no way out. All I begged him for was to stop until we find a solution, but there were no promises. Instead of things calming down, a new catastrophe happened. The catastrophe is that Shaban opened the door in the morning to go to work and found the courtyard in front of the house filled with dead birds they were breeding. All of them were dead in a strange way. The birds were without heads and their necks were torn as if they were forcibly pulled by hooks. He also found the young sheep dead in the same way. It was a tough scene, and the losses were significant because they relied on birds and sheep for their livelihood. Of course, they eat from them, sell them, and raise them. The Hagan family literally lost everything, and the ruins surrounded them from all sides. They were afraid to light a fire in the house, stopped cooking, baking, and boiling water for laundry. They were deprived of making any food at home. Since they knew the reason, they became terrified of entering the bathroom in the house, to the point that they avoided using it. To make matters worse, they could no longer light a fire in the house. They stopped cooking, baking, and boiling water, as they were scared to use any flame inside the house. They even stopped using the bathroom, and the neighbors from the village sent them daily food. Their situation became difficult for everyone. After that, people who memorized the Quran in the country began to organize patrols, reading the Quran at home most of the day. However, there was no improvement because as soon as they finished reading, everything returned to its original state. One day, Bint Shaban, the elder daughter, was sleeping at night with a lit lamp. She saw the illusion of a snake walking on the wall. It approached the door of the room, and she tried to escape. But the door, surprisingly, had moved about 1/2 meter from its natural position. The girl stood for a moment, feeling dizzy. She found the door of the room moving towards the shifted side, avoiding the approaching snake by coincidence. Suddenly, she felt a terrible pain in her eyes, lost her sight, and fell to the ground. Her father and siblings rushed to the room, finding her eyes bleeding. They discovered that instead of leaving through the door, she collided with the nails on the wall next to the door where clothes were hung. They took her to the hospital, but her left eye deteriorated every day, facing a tragedy worse than the previous one each day. She became depressed, possessed by Jinn, and started speaking in a strange tongue. She claimed that she would not leave until someone eliminates her and ends her life. Shaban, her brother, shouldered her and confined her to her room. As for me, I entrusted my affairs to God, decided to surrender, and leave the spiritual field altogether. I said to myself that I am not capable of what is happening. I was wrong from the beginning when I came here. I came to console her aunt and decided to return to my country and leave spiritual healing forever. However, I waited for an incident that made me change my decision. Suddenly, a creature from the Jinn appeared before me. Its body resembled that of a child around 7 years old, with thick, heavy hair. He was not a child, but his body looked like one, with a beard, wearing a white robe. His eyes were narrow. I recoiled and, frightened, asked him, "What do you want from me?" "I am Sheikh Taha, your father's friend. I came to help you and be with you. just like I was with your father. May he rest in peace." I couldn't understand what he meant, so I asked him to explain everything. He said that we, the Jinn sheikhs, have knowledge beyond anyone's imagination. Your father instructed me to teach you everything, so that you can carry the banner as he did, and serve every unfortunate person afflicted by Jinn or black magic. What is required of me? Leave yourself to me for 40 days. 40 days, Amin, and I will tell you things to do and execute them precisely, one by one during these 40 days, my son, Mr. Yunus. Exactly 40 days, and then I returned to the Hagan family. I returned a different person. In these 40 days, I learned things from Sheikh Taha that never crossed my mind or yours. Even if I tell you, you would not comprehend all the secrets and mysteries. Details of the 40 days for the second story, another story I can tell you, full of secrets and commitments and terrifying details. The important thing is that I returned to the Hagan family, knowing exactly what to do. I met Obaid and asked him to come to the house with me. Shaban was very surprised that I had returned. "I won't hide it from you, Mr. Yunus. I was told that I am a harbinger of doom, and I achieved it when I went to the house. I held a meeting with Shaban and her family. I can't say it was good or bad. People are sufficient with what they have, as I told you. I achieved it. I asked Shaban to gather everyone in the house to pray 2 units of prayer together, a necessity. Shaban was tense and told me that we haven't been able to perform 2 units of prayer together in the house for a long time. Don't worry, Shaban, get up, we will pray together. Despite anyone's presence, and whoever thinks they can stop us from praying, connecting, or getting close to our Lord, we will pray together, even if by force." A knocking sound echoed on the door of the house. Shaban continued to ask, "Who is it? Who is it?" No one answered, and the door wasn't opened. I told him, "Let it be, let them knock, spread the prayer rugs, and do what I instructed you, Uncle Shaban. We don't need anything to distract us. We'll be in the hands of our Lord. Don't respond to any sound or focus on any knocking, it will happen." And indeed, Uncle Shaban, prayer rugs were laid out, and I stood in front, with Shaban and Obaid in the front row, followed by their children, and then the girls. As for Bakita, she remained in her room, and the prayer began. While praying, I could hear knocking on the door persisting. Bakita's voice, sounding desperate, came from her room with every knock. There were constant interruptions during the prayer, and I could hear someone calling my name. I kept my voice as steady as possible to maintain my concentration while praying the 2 units of prayer. After I finished, all the surrounding sounds ceased. Everyone present seemed tense. Shaban, Bakita, and Obaid went to the second floor. When we reached the room where Bakita was, Shaban opened the door, and for a moment, we all glimpsed dark, tall figures extending to the ceiling surrounding Bakita's bed. She claimed they were Jinn standing around her. And then, later, Bakita, tied with ropes, was in the middle of a drawn circle made of musk. They struggled to control her, placing her within the circle. I instructed them to stay calm, not to move, and not to fear, assuring them that no harm would come to us. Our Lord would protect us. I placed a bowl of incense on the ground and stood in front of Bakita, who was seated within the circle. She was laughing, her expressions challenging. I began reciting various verses from the Quran and displaying different images. Then I said, "In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and by the power of the King, who filled his heavens and earth with his light, and his majesty and strength above every angel, Jinn and devil, and above every ruler trembling in fear. All creatures have humbled themselves before him from the highest position, and they answered the call of the almighty name that shakes every throne beneath it. In this moment, appear before Sheikh Taha, the kind assistant. As for Bakita, She looked at me defiantly, and I started reciting the powerful words. The moment I began, Sheikh Taha moved and started to release Bakhita's hands. No one else could see him except me, and Obaid and Shaban were surprised, not knowing whom I was addressing. Suddenly, Sheikh Taha materialized before them and said one sentence, "I am not coming out of her." I held the incense burner and lit it until smoke started emerging. Then, I removed the incense with my hands. I began to circumambulate, reciting prayers within a circle of musk, and within it was a small container. In the name of Allah, I fired the shot, and I presented the incense to the building in the name of the Mighty, the Most Forgiving, who shook the mountains and split the seas. In the name of Allah, I fired the shot, presented the incense to the building in the name of the Mighty, the Most Forgiving, who shook the mountains and split the seas. Applause. I continued to recite. Sheikh Taha was guiding me through specific verses of the Quran to recite behind him. At first, it seemed like a challenge, but the challenge faded away. The challenging looks transformed into suspicious and anxious gazes, evolving into fear. It developed until it turned into terror, a terrifying moment, and frightened me. The present individuals were terrified. Their screams turned from attempts to escape to cries of terror. In seconds, the entire house seemed to flip over our heads. Screams echoed from every corner. Shaban and Ubaid felt like they were being chased. I urged them to stay in their places, repeating and chanting, seeking refuge in Allah the Generous, using complete words of Allah that neither a righteous person nor a sinner can surpass. Seeking refuge from the evil that descends from the sky, the evil that ascends in it, the evil sown in the earth, the evil that springs from it, the trials of night and day, and the mischief of night visitors, except for a good one, O most merciful. I turned to Sheikh Taha and said, Sheikh Taha, fulfill the covenant, exact revenge, save the sons of Adam with the generosity, pardon, and authority of Allah. Sheikh Taha had a sword in his hands. Just as I made this request, it seemed like he was still screaming from the torment. You have the choice to leave in peace and never return. Never harm anyone from the household or anyone else. The second option is to enter the fight, and you will be killed and burnt. But it seems he did not respond. He continued to scream and ignored everything I said to him. Sheikh Taha approached Shuklan, and in a moment, Shuklan knelt down on one knee, as if his will was taken away, or there was something compelling him back. May Allah grant you well-being, Sheikh Taha, he said. He grabbed him by his hair and with his sword. Taha, with his sword on his neck, said, In the name of Allah, the One, the Subduer. In the name of Allah, the One, the Subduer. We could have continued and eliminated him, but I haven't forgotten. My father told me that when the Jinn seeks refuge, I must grant it and not pursue revenge, or else I will be among the people of evil. Also, I haven't forgotten that what he was doing was seeking revenge for his children. This means he is a grieving father mourning his children. Just like how we seek revenge, if anyone harms a hair of our children, our family, our father, our sisters, or our mother, we won't let it go. Shuklan left his incense after I took all the oaths from him that he won't return. He left without a trace, never to return. The session ended, and praise be to Allah, who blessed me with His grace, sustenance, and the knowledge bestowed upon me. All thanks are due to Allah, as befits His majestic face and mighty dominion. Praise be to Allah always and forever. The issue with the Hagan family's house was resolved, and thank God, I stayed with this family for a day, a second day, and a third, until I completed a week of protection. During this time, I fortified them. The family's situation changed, subhanallah, from one state to another, moving from complete distance from our Lord, the Exalted, to extreme closeness and moderate religiosity. Matters stabilized, returned to normal, and the entire town came to greet me. Each person came to tell me about their house, some true and some false. I did a very extensive tour, and the tour revealed, for your information, that 99% of the people who asked for my help and assistance were dealing with fantasies, psychological disorders, depression, or minor sadness. There was a very small percentage that had something in the house, like a very light touch or some jinn whispers. If they mentioned Allah, the jinn would leave. However, I did not witness a case like this or a situation like this, similar to the Shaban family's house. Consider, as I am telling you now, my age is considerable, and I have passed the age of 70. Yet my experience in the Hagan family's house was the most difficult, intense, and extreme experience I have ever gone through. Perhaps it was a lesson, and as I said before, the lesson is for everyone who believes in this matter and for those who do not believe. Everyone has their life, their tribe, and their clan. Dealing with them is not a joke. People who read Mr. Yunus in books and think this is beautiful and easy, inform them that it is not a joke. It is easy to prepare for, but the execution is extremely difficult. Based on stories and experiences I have been through, I want to tell you that in dozens of cases that Allah has destined for me to treat, after I treat them, there remains a crack inside them, deep pain and sorrow that do not show, and they do not expose themselves to anything. But this pain has left a significant crack inside them, and, based on Allah, I urge you, just as you will narrate the story, to convey the advice: stay away from anything that creates a relationship between you and the other world.